Agriculture remains a critical sector that most African economies and rural livelihoods in the continent depend on. In Kenya, for example, the agriculture sector directly contributes to 26% of the country's GDP and another 27% indirectly through linkages with other sectors. It also accounts for 65% of the country's export earnings. Moreover, the sector employs more than 40% of the country's total population and more than 70% of its rural population, the majority of which are considered small-scale farmers. This trend is one that is seen across other countries in the East African region.
Trade is an important focal point in Africa and can be a driver for growth and development. And just by trading alone, it can be able to lift millions of people out of poverty because of the way trade can be an instrument of change. It's an instrument of change because, number one, it offers employment and a source of income, and as a result of that, it's able to support millions of families in their livelihoods. Trade agreements are part of the globalization processes, and if one is not careful, you may end up signing agreements that are not in favor of your interests. So what Econews Africa does is to basically analyze these agreements, simplify them for the stakeholders who need to make decisions quickly, and equip them with the tools to be able to make quick decisions and sound those decisions against what is going to be the necessary action at local level.
It is noted that trade in agriculture may contribute to food security through augmenting domestic supplies to meet consumption, reducing supply variability but not price instability, fostering economic growth and improving efficient use of world resources, but if and only if such trading is just, fair, and transparent.
When you look at the way free trade agreements are structured, you are talking about a free trade agreement with a country like the United States or a country in Europe, for example, who heavily subsidize the agricultural sectors. And because of these subsidies, they are able to outcompete any other country based on competitive pricing. Now, because of that, then, they can easily be able to take a country out of operation in terms of the agricultural sector. I'll give you an example. The North America Free Trade Agreement is responsible for the loss of livelihoods of at least 2 million farmers in Mexico. That's not a small number. Now, when you have 2 million people losing their livelihoods all of a sudden, that tells you that it is something that needs to be addressed carefully, so that agriculture is seen as an important tool, not just in terms of securing food security, but strategically for a country to be able to provide for itself. It's important to seek substantive information and analysis of FTAs, because FTAs are not an end in themselves. They come either good or bad, and it all depends on negotiation. So it's important for African countries to seek to understand the nitty-gritty details, because FTAs are huge documents and the details are what matter to everyday people. And it's those details that are hidden in those FTAs. So it's important to understand the content and the nature of FTAs to be able to equip countries and negotiators with the necessary tools to be able to negotiate agreements that are in favor of their national interests.
You'll find that in most trade agreements, it is not driven by the interest of the people of the country. It's only driven by interest of a few individuals who have vested interest in the finalization of the agreements. Point 2, you'll find that there's minimal to no public engagement in regards to the negotiation process. There's no engagement of the CSOs, this stands for the civil society organizations. There's no involvement of the private entities and the farmers, the small-scale farmers.
In light of the gaps highlighted in relation to trade negotiations and agreements, Econews carries out ongoing research and advocacy, undertakes capacity building for both communities and policy stakeholders, and offers policy alternatives to these processes.
I think the biggest threat to agriculture is subsidies. We've opened up our markets to foreign products. We are facing stiff competition from products that have been heavily subsidized by the global north. And because of that, then, we are not able to grow our agricultural sector, which have been disinvested still. So you have underinvestment in the agricultural sector versus competition coming in from heavily subsidized products. That, I think, is the biggest threat to our agricultural sector at the moment. I think what is required is for us to try and achieve some sort of structural transformation of the agricultural sector. And that's important because if you look at the way agriculture is structured currently, it doesn't address issues. We do not have investment in the agricultural sector that are necessary to spur the sector to be able to grow to the kind of level it's supposed to grow to. And because of that, you have a situation where the underinvestment has led to low yields. You do not have enough farming practices that are modernized. We still have non-mechanized agriculture at the rural level. And because of that, then we are not able to till a large number of acreage. Because of the technologies that we use, we are not able to yield substantive returns on the acreage that we plant. And because of that, then, overall it leads to poor performance of the agricultural sector. So I think what is needed is investment, deliberate investment into the agricultural sector to be able to bring in the required resources, the required machinery, the required implements to be able to invest in the sector and make the sector more mechanized, and beyond mechanization, also make the sector be able to address the shortfalls that have been experienced over the last few years.
Successes and shortcomings of policies at the national, regional, and global level are all shaping agricultural trade, including some of the best and worst practices for the continent of Africa.
What is happening is, regional integration efforts are significant. So for example, if I'll just give an example, we have the East African Community process that has been going on since the year 2000, and beginning to open up the markets from 2005. Now beyond that, countries have now even gone further and talked about the Continental Free Trade Agreement. Now what is happening is, they are committing to open up to 90% of their trade between themselves, because they are saying we've opened up to 82%, 85% in other instances with outside regions in FTAs. Now what that does is, it basically opens up haphazardly the continent, because we are opening up based on commitments we have made externally, without necessarily having to look at what pace and at what moderation we need to take in terms of opening up our trade regionally. What we need to do, because trading is an important aspect, we need to trade with outside regions. What we need to do is to be careful about the kind of commitments we are putting into these external FTAs, to make sure that we do not overcommit and oversell the kind of things we want to put in that market. That's number one. Then number two, we need to develop export capability to be able to export into this market, because we've opened up our regions, but we've not been able to exploit the kind of market that is open out there. We should focus more on developing and growing the regional integration through the SCFTA. That will be important, so that when we focus on growing and developing the SCFTA, that will give us time to concentrate on building regional markets. Because there's nothing like national markets anymore, because they are small, and because of the colonization project, we have very small markets at national level. So it will be important for us to focus on the SCFTA, to start opening up these markets at regional level, so that then we have a bigger market to work with. But then we should now build capability for small-scale traders to start exporting into this market. A model framework will help us determine what should go into these agreements and what should not go into these agreements. So if you look at the United States, for example, they have a model investment agreement that they use, so that any negotiations they work with about investment agreements, they have to use a model that is guiding the process. Why can't we also have a model to say, this is what we are going to take into a trade agreement, and this is what we are not negotiating in a trade agreement? That will help us to determine how far we should go in terms of committing to the kind of commitments we should make in an FTA.
Econews, working with both state and non-state actors, continues to insist on fair, just, and inclusive economic systems in Africa. Towards this end, Econews takes a progressive approach to advocating for bilateral and multilateral trade that puts sustainable development at the center of trade relations on the continent of Africa.